Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the second of our 3 parent community forums here at Bethpage School District. Proud to have alongside me today our Assistant Superintendent for Instruction, Mike Spence, our Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources, Caroline Lavelle, our Assistant Superintendent for Business, Scott Harrington, and our Director of Technology, Andrew Choi. Last night we had an extremely large group of parents and community members who joined us, and we're glad that some of you are here able to join us today. These meetings are very important to allow us an opportunity to share with you more detailed information regarding all of our reopening plans. From the initial start point of our communication to you and the community on previous Thursday, and taking of the quite a number of emails, a few hundred emails, and some people sent 1 or 2 questions. Many of you sent 8, 12, 16, or 20 questions. And we did take the time with this group with me here, in addition to all of our building principals, to spend Thursday throughout the weekend and into yesterday reviewing every single question, trying to make sure that today's presentation answers all of those questions. And at the conclusion of the presentation, we will, of course, along the way, be able to answer some of your questions as well. As a reminder, we do have that separate email, returntoschool@bethpage.ws, as a way in which you can send in your questions. And Mr. Harrington and Mr. Spence are helping to pull those questions into a place where we can refer to them during the course of this forum. So why don't I get us started? I'm going to ask Mr. Choi is going to switch the screen for me over to our slide presentation. Please note that this slide presentation is also located now on the district website and our reopening plans page. It's the same slide presentation that was utilized last evening for the first of our forums, and will be the same that's used again tomorrow at 5 o'clock in the third of our forums. Everything that we're trying to accomplish here has been a massive undertaking, the work of many months of a large group of people from every group within our community to establish our academic and social emotional program goals, but always following the number one priority, which is doing it in the healthiest and safest way possible for our students and staff. So we formulated a Return to School Advisory Committee, consisted of the Board of Education, all of our district administration, our leadership members from the Bethpage Congress of Teachers, the Bethpage Teacher Assistants, lots of communication with our PTA Council as I meet with them regularly, every week or every other week, to share my concerns with them and to hear from them the concerns they receive from all of you. Our clerical unit, custodial unit, our medical advice comes from the chief of the Pediatric Intensive Care Unit at Cohen's Children's Medical Center from the Northwell Health Systems. And then lastly, all of you, the parents who spent the time to go through our parent survey and provide the very important, valuable feedback in these preparations for our reopening of school. Let's take a look at some of the feedback that you shared with us. There were over 1,800 participants, and since we allowed you to respond for more than one child on the survey, over 2,300 students are represented here. And as you can see, there is quite a good representation of each building, a large percentage of each building represented. One of the main questions is, how comfortable are you as a community of sending your children back to school if we were able to maintain our health and safety measures to the maximum extent possible? And 80% of you were feeling moderately or very comfortable knowing that we may be able to do that through our planning. Similarly, if we were going to open in September, did you plan to send your children to school for in-person learning? And you see the strong response from the community. We know that masks being worn has been a key component to the control of the virus, and we do have provisions that are going to require masks, as I've mentioned in our other communications. And we wanted to know, how comfortable are you as parents sending your children to school wearing masks, with overwhelming majority there. And an important aspect of our school is making sure children can get here through our transportation requirements and eligibilities. And we do have to take into account your desires with the use of transportation. And on another question, it was noted that more than 75% of you would be able to manage to provide your own transportation to and from school if needed. There's so much more to do, and all of this requires all of your help, not just that of our staff here in Bethpage. We're going to take everyone's participation in this. It's going to take everyone to pull it off and do it very well. And what are the areas and where we're focused? And again, in bold, purposefully, is the health and safety of all students and staff and community members. But we have an obligation to try to maximize our educational experiences for all students, while always being consistent with our safety practices. The academic, social, and emotional needs of all learners is paramount in our school experiences and environments, once we can do it in a healthy and safe way. But all of our plans require there to be some predictable, sustainable models, and yet be manageable between plans. It's so important for everyone to remember that the spring was 3 long, hard months, unlike any that we've ever experienced. But now we're in the process of having to plan for an entire school year. And there'll be circumstances well beyond our own control here in Bethpage that will force us to have to make decisions and make switches without much notice. And we are responsible to make sure that we don't lose that continuity of instruction regardless of which format the students are being taught in. And so, taking a look at some of the information that came down from the state, in the middle of July we finally received the guidance to help us finalize planning. Schools are allowed to reopen if we are in phase 4 and the daily infection rate remains below 5%. Currently, the infection rate is hovering at or below 1% for the region. And this is great news. It means that all of the vigilance going on in our community and elsewhere is working. But it's important to note that the American Academy of Pediatrics and the CDC both strongly advise that if you can, get your children back in school personally, physically, in front of your teachers, if you can do it in a health and safe way. And so with that decision, New York State, and those metrics, New York State has decided schools can open. But once again, the plans that we have, and we have a set of plans, all in person, hybrid, which is a reduced capacity, or all distance learning, we can put those plans into place at any of our 5 buildings, our 3 elementary, the middle, and high school, depending on the circumstances. But we must be able to do that quickly, and we also must be able to have our plans able to be evolving over time, as there are many changes that happen quickly. Some of the recommendations that were in place in July and the week of the 13th, changed a week later. These are changes that come from departments of health, from the CDC. Some of these changes will come in the form of how we're going to handle certain situations. because no one has done this before, and there's collaboration happening everywhere. However, each district is in a very unique position of dealing simply with their own enrollment and their own physical plants, their own facilities that will be able to be managed in certain ways. So as we develop these plans and we try to collaborate with others, we may need to make some adjustments, and I'll explain throughout what that means. So at this time, Bethpage schools will be opening K-12 with all of our buildings in an all in-person plan. That means that all students will be present Mondays through Fridays, with each classroom maintaining social distancing and including barriers. We do know that if all students were present, 100% attendance each and every day, which doesn't happen even under normal circumstances, but that is what we planned for. On some grade levels, in some secondary courses, there may be the need for a few students to rotate out on occasion and move to an additional instructional space monitored or taught by another licensed teacher to allow our classrooms to maintain all of those present within the capacity that includes social distancing in all directions. All students and staff will be required to wear masks, and there will be specific instructions on what mask breaks look like. Cohorts are in place for grades K to 6 to reduce the mixing of students. And in all cases, we've taken a very close look at our buildings, taken a look at the class sizes in different grades or different courses, and determine where we can move classes in the traditional classroom or the traditional wing of which they've been housed, and move them to larger spaces and move smaller class sizes to the smaller spaces, all while being able to maintain social distancing. So the most important health and safety protocol to allow students to re-enter a building is for us to ensure that we have social distancing in place, or barriers, or wearing masks. It is vital to note that in Bethpage we will be providing all three. We have all of our instructional spaces designed with students 6 feet apart. We have all of our desks, student work areas where barriers will be placed. And I'll show you a few examples shortly. And we will require all students and staff to wear masks or face coverings, and if necessary, we will provide the masks if needed. Mask breaks are recommended, and we will be looking to provide those regularly, but always while maintaining social distancing. So what are our classrooms going to look like? First thing you'll note is that classrooms that tended to have carpet areas, reading areas, small group instructional areas, all of the extra items in a classroom that might have been used in the past for different strategies have been removed for us to attempt to maximize the number of students who can attend in person. Where the desks are 6 feet apart in all directions, and hopefully you can see in the image the barriers that we have in place. You'll notice the black hinges vertically. The fact that it's hard to see is a good thing. It means these are not so overt in their presence here. Here's another example from another angle of what barriers would look like in a class. These barriers are on order. We did have a number sent to stage a room to show all of you what a classroom would potentially look like. These are 3-sided and will be not adhered, but there'll be little brackets on each desk to allow them to be in place and not have people worry about having them knocked over. There are many questions that, again, have driven this entire presentation about masks being required and the breaks associated with it. Masks are required for all students and staff and will be enforced by our code of conduct, like other ways in which you have to handle yourself in our buildings. And all of those expectations will be part of the training and review that go into our opening of school for all of our students, and especially those that may have concerns about wearing masks. But they'll need to be worn for arrival and dismissal. In our secondary buildings where hallway passing is taking place, in any bathrooms that are being used for people that are going, well, in bathrooms at all times, although we will be limiting the number of people use at a time, in any common areas you may think of. But there will be mask breaks at this time, and all of those will, however, be at the instruction of the teacher. That means that students will be given mask breaks, but only when the teacher determines it's the right time and place to do so. Where we have students with social distancing and behind barriers when indoors, or potentially, of course, when we're outside, which we hope to do as much as possible. And as of this time, we've determined that the elementary school students will get 2 breaks per hour of instruction, and the secondary school students will get a break each period. But you notice it consists of up to 15 minutes. That is the standard for close contact in terms of exposure to COVID. And in a little while, I'll be more specific about what that means in our contact tracing plans and why that is specific there. All students and staff are going to be required to complete a daily health questionnaire at home. Staff are already completing this for those that have been here throughout the summer. Everyone will be required to have your temperature taken at home. If there are issues with people taking temperatures at home, we need to work with those families to do something about it. And then a few questions that are going to be important to know each day. The specific version of how this is going to occur is still being determined, as there are numerous companies that are trying to develop applications that are more powerful than a simple online survey. The reason being that all online surveys will give us everyone who has indicated their health screening is complete, but it doesn't tell us who has not completed it. And that is a vital piece of data that we need to work with each day. We also know that if we are able to secure an app, like one that you could complete on your smartphone, it is much easier to do each morning. It is also only going to require child's name, school, grade level, and in essence, the parent email that is associated with it. So in terms of any significant individualized data of concern, those are the only parts that will become part of it. It's important to note that the Department of Health guidance strongly urged us to make sure temperatures are taken at home and not in school upon arrival. And the reason is that in order to scan students, no matter what technology you're able to secure, number one, it would require students to bottleneck at locations in the building that you simply couldn't manage to ensure the distancing is in place. Number two, there are going to be moments where students are even false positive, and how many of those and what you do with those students temporarily is a very difficult problem to solve. So the guidance was very clear that it is highly recommended to do it at home. We understand that there are concerns with that, and as I said earlier, that's what our plans are at this time. If we find better solutions to these problems, we would absolutely shift and make them available to us. Cohorting, grades K to 6. These students will be in their classes, in their groups, throughout the course of the day, and as a group would not travel to any particular area aside from being outdoors. As mentioned, though, we may have classes that need some students to go as a small group to another location for instruction. And as to be very transparent, prior to any of the parent surveys that have come back requesting virtual learning, you can see the grade levels in each of the 3 elementary schools that require a few students to be rotated out. What would that rotation look like? Currently, we believe that it would be a small group in each of the classes of that grade who would go to an additional location and only mix with students of the rest of that grade, although again the mixing will be all done through social distancing barriers and masks, and be taught by an additional teacher potentially the ELA lesson and a few specials in the morning. And then if that group goes back to their classroom and another small group goes out for the afternoon, who might have the ELA lesson and another set of specials, for example. This isn't finalized because of the needs for us to survey the parents to determine how many students will be in attendance in person in September. So again, what you see in front of you in the elementary schools is what is, I guess, easy to describe as the worst case scenario of 100% of all students showing up 100% of the time. And we already know that that's not going to be the case. So once we complete our parent survey tomorrow, we can start breaking down that data and make adjustments within each building. Teachers will be traveling to the classrooms, not classes of kids going to other teacher rooms. But there will be the need for small groups of students or individual students to come out of their class and attend some form of service that they have as part of their program. Our band and orchestra will not be playing as a whole, but they will still have lessons being conducted in small groups or individually. And again, everything listed will occur with social distancing in place. 7 to 12 will be different. Due to the nature of a secondary program with the extensive offerings that we have in Bethpage High School and in JFK's 7th and 8th grade program, the different levels of classes, the different offerings of classes and electives, cohorting is simply impossible without destroying the academic program and taking away opportunities for students that simply would never be able to recover from. So we will plan to follow a 9-period day. The 6th grade, of course, will follow a 9-period day as well, but again, they'll be following it in a cohort model. Each building at JFK and the high school may be adjusting their bell schedules to allow for an extra minute or two during passing. They might be allowing for an extra few minutes in the morning and the afternoon during 1st and 9th period for staggered arrivals and dismissals. At JFK, we've already reduced now congestion in the hallways by a third with cohorting the 6th grade. And with staggered releases and very serious directional plans in place throughout the hallways, through different stairwells, with masks being worn at all times, and lots, again, reminders, and the fact that we will not allow students to use any lockers at all, they will simply be traveling to their next location, congestion in the hallways will be reduced dramatically at passing. And this is also good news because, again, and we'll refer to it more during contact tracing, simply passing by somebody who has symptoms or is infected in the hallways is not considered close contact. And so the risk is incredibly low for contracting the virus that way. Because you won't be using your lockers, Each building principal will be sending information to homes shortly for those who are attending in person on the types of materials that they'd ask you to bring. And part of that is we're continuing to work with our teaching staff to determine what instruction will look like inside the in-person classroom. We know there are many questions about transportation, and again, I asked the community to take a look at the fact that if busing is going to be different, would you care to still use it? We are reducing the capacity on all the buses and requiring masks to be worn at all times. If for some reason your child is medically unable to wear a mask, we'll work with you and our transportation supervisor to determine how to best put your child on a bus where social distancing is in place, since no buses will likely be able to have social distancing in place. That would take a bus with a capacity of 66 elementary students and bring the capacity down to 12. That's not something that is sustainable. That's not something that even we can, if we had and cared to quadruple the transportation budget, it's not something the company can even fulfill. So we've already reduced capacity, and once we know the outcome of our survey for parents to opt out of the bus transportation, we'll know exactly how many we can reduce it down to. But social distancing will not be in place of 6 feet. The seats acting as barriers between one another front to back, and masks are the only solutions we have on buses. Our buses will be completely sanitized between the morning and afternoon runs. They cannot be sanitized between high school, middle school, and elementary runs. Arrival and dismissal is obviously very important with the gathering of students at each time of the day. This is going to be one of those incredibly evolving planning phases for us. And the reason being is that once we know how many students are in attendance, we'll be able to better plan the specifics. So there are plans in place for now, but those can surely change if we find a better way to do that. But to give you an example, JFK, I'm going to ask parents that if you are just in tremendous need because of work, for example, you give the building administration notice, and that there will be smaller groups that can come into the building early, and that each grade level gets its own window of opportunity to be dropped off. And the reason is twofold. Number one, to be able to keep the grades more separated as much as possible and prevent gathering. But number two is, with so many more of you dropping students at school, the car congestion on Broadway at JFK, trying to get in and out of the parking lot, is going to be quite a challenge. And so we do want to remind you that there may be some very heavy delays on certain days, especially during weather issues. Today, after this presentation and our question and answer period, we will have all 5 of our buildings and their specific plans posted to our reopening page on the district website, where some of the more specifics on these arrival and dismissal plans will be described as of today, meaning our principals have completed plans knowing all students are in attendance, and eventually that may change again once we determine how many actually will be in attendance. Lunch. Ask any middle school student, they'll tell you it's the most important class of the day. K to 6 will be eating in their classrooms until further notice. 7 to 12 will be assigned areas where, again, social distancing is in place. That means alternate locations, large spaces, and in particular, going outside K to 12 as much as possible. And the principals are working on ways in which in elementary school to find space in their rotation to go outdoors, and in the secondary schools to ensure the different areas where students may be able to eat in a pleasant outdoor environment. As you would expect, during the time in which you're eating, Masks will not be required, so social distancing must be maintained. That's going to be improved dramatically in terms of our serving of lunch, as the menus will consist of prepackaged meal options. Especially in the early stages, you'd expect all cold options and then potentially transitioning to some hot options, but all of them will be prepackaged meals, boxed lunches, or bagged lunches, in other words. K to 6 parents, we're going to work to make it easy for you to electronically pre-select your children's meal choice for those that are participating in meal service. And that way the principals and our partners at Aramark who run our meal service programs will be able to provide the meals on carts directly to classrooms very easily. 7 to 12 will be a grab and go, but because, as mentioned earlier, the other locations will be used, we'll be providing carts with those selections and bring it to students to avoid long lines at the cafeteria that we would normally utilize. Lots of important questions about recess. Elementary students will stay with their class to conduct recess. We know that recess is an ongoing concern. We don't have all the answers yet as to what types of activities we'll be participating in. And we know that the physical education administrators across New York State, and in particular Long Island, are meeting tomorrow to review and discuss and develop additional outdoor activities that are safe and enjoyable. And in order to do that, there'll be limited to no equipment being utilized. Playgrounds at the moment, which are open to use but are cleaned regularly, will be cleaned additionally and as much as possible. We know we have our fields open, and we are looking to secure tents so that we can get students outside more often when weather is not cooperating. But there's a caveat on tents that's difficult for school districts. There are significant permitting issues and safety protocols to meet to have very large tents, which means that we are going to, no schools should be able to easily get really large tents. They max out at about a 20 by 20, and we're working to get numerous ones of those in each of our grounds so that students and staff may be able to get outside to enjoy more fresh air when possible. We know that JFK students also participate in recess often, and Mr. Fullerton and Ms. Hayes have plans for that. Specifics on recess, again, on what it's going to look like, are still being worked on. Throughout our buildings, we'll be following all of the sanitation and hygiene requirements from the CDC and the Department of Health. The product we use, Virex, is the gold standard for schools, and we do have plenty of it in stock. The Board of Education has agreed to allow us to hire 5 additional staff members, 1 per building, to help with cleaning. And we've also ordered additional equipment that allows for more effective and more efficient cleaning of facilities. Items such as electrostatic sprayers that allow the Virex to be dispersed more thoroughly. Those are already on their way. And we do have hand sanitizer stations installed in all classrooms in high traffic areas. And we will be working with all students and staff on training for proper hygiene, hand hygiene, which is, by the recommendation of the health experts, the most important of the cleaning and disinfecting items. It's your hands in particular. So if our habits are to ensure that we wash our hands regularly, that reduces the risk dramatically. Bathrooms will be cleaned far more than typical, even though we do a pretty good job of it. And we are going to make sure we log in as students are visiting for potential use of contact tracing practices. Lunch, we'll have students eating in the classrooms K to 6, so in terms of cleaning is not a concern when you're at your own desk. But 7 to 12 it is, and we'll make sure that they're able to be cleaned prior to other groups visiting. Staff will be on high alert to daily go through our buildings and clean all the high-touch areas, door handles, handrails in particular, and our nurses' offices to make sure that we get that extra cleaning in there, as well as, again, all classrooms and shared spaces thoroughly cleaned each and every night. There are many questions about ventilation. All of our unit ventilators have been upgraded and filters have been replaced. This was actually a fortunate coincidence that we were in the process of a energy performance upgrade unrelated to COVID that was scheduled for this summer. So it was something that we didn't have to add to our burden, and that has already been taken care of. We do not have central air conditioning throughout the district, as you know. So windows and doors will remain open, inside doors will remain open throughout the course of the day, except for those classrooms that do have air conditioning units due to medical issues. The CDC has made it clear that those classrooms that have medical concerns that require air conditioning, which we have a number of them for students or staff issues throughout the district, that it's okay to close the door and turn the air conditioner on. The CDC just recommends that fans are not to be used for circulating air. That if you needed a fan, it would be a personal one for yourself. So we won't have fans at this moment, again, at this time, as based on those recommendations. And then our air filtration systems through our unit ventilators will maximize outside fresh air intake. This will include having that move in each building and each room 2 hours prior to arrival and beyond, and 2 hours after dismissal. Contact tracing is a very important process that is so new to all of us, but in particular schools, where only a few weeks ago the answer was simply, we'll follow whatever the CDC or the Department of Health says. But now they've provided us with more specific information that helped us really clarify what we can accomplish in the safest, healthiest way by having students in front of us. Close contact is identified as, or defined as, 6 feet, within 6 feet of a positive case for more than 15 minutes. And when, of course, that person might be sick. And if you've taken care of somebody who's positive, or directly touching someone who's positive, shared food with somebody who's positive, or been exposed to sneezing or coughing or talking with somebody who's positive. And this gives us a lot of confidence then that the plans we have in place with the reduced capacities in the hallways, we're passing by somebody with everyone wearing masks, is a very low risk because of the need to be exposed to a positive case for more than 15 minutes. And this also ties back into our wearing of the masks and the breaks that are associated with that in each of our plans. And this is going to lead in our close contact understanding as to how we deal with contact tracing. And we'll follow the requirements of the CDC and the Department of Health. But while no personnel are required to be trained, we've already trained every school nurse through the Johns Hopkins contact tracing protocols. That seems to be the gold standard. And our nurses are working to develop our protocols for staff to identify students or even other adults with related symptoms, and then how to work with students to make sure they get assessed properly, and if necessary, utilize isolation rooms that will be identified in each building. And then while there's lots of training to take place for our staff and for our students and for all of you as parents, and we could surely grab those training videos from other places, we feel it's important for our students and staff in particular to see familiar faces in these training videos. So we'll be producing our own series of them. as you might expect, a public service announcement type of presentation for all of our community to be able to understand how to best handle all of our health and safety. So looking back at close contacts, and that's a big important term for us to remember. Close contacts are going to be required to be quarantined and will be monitored by the Nassau County Department of Health. And if necessary, we'll inform others within our school buildings if there are concerns, so that you can be able to monitor for signs or symptoms. But let me give you an example, and this is again new information that has only come out within the last week that we've worked over the last number of days with our entire nursing staff, our new executive director of PPS, Lisa Lucchese, Mr. Harrington, through our health and safety protocols and procedures here to try to identify for you. And so I understand this is a tough slide to follow along. We do have a contact tracing and testing document that's being finalized, that's required to be updated and posted by the 21st. We hope to have it by end of business today, if not early tomorrow, which may have easier charts to follow than can be promoted here on a slide. But just to give you an understanding, what's a confirmed case? The confirmed case will, of course, be followed through Department of Health or doctor's guidance. You'd only come back when they clear you. If you are someone who has symptoms, and of course, if that case gets confirmed, you go back to those confirmed case guidelines. If you have symptoms but you're negative because you were tested, and you're then with no fever and no symptoms for at least 24 hours, without fever, and you can return to school. If you have symptoms but you're not tested, then you stay home for 14 days on isolation from the first symptom. And then, if you have no fever for 24 hours and the 14 days expires, you'd be able to come back to school. If you have symptoms and it's confirmed through a doctor that you actually have something else, and then you would simply follow the normal procedures to return to school with medical clearance. So again, as to recall, a close contact is exposure for more than 15 minutes within 6 feet for 48 hours before the onset of a symptom. And if that happens in a classroom, the student or staff that's considered in close contact would be on quarantine. There's lots of questions about if a student is in close contact and is in quarantine, what about that student's sibling that's in another grade in that building? Does that student have to then be isolated? And at this time, the answer is no. We consider that, or not we, the CDC considers that secondary contact. And if they've been exposed but not symptomatic, they can remain in school. It also means that even though a whole class may be present while somebody in the class ends up becoming sick, it's not a guarantee that that entire class goes home on quarantine for 14 days. That would be determined in consultation with the Department of Health based on the contact tracing pathway to see which students were within the exposure limits, which were within the distance limits that would need to be sent home. There were many of you had questions on testing. We are not conducting testing. And we are not requiring anyone to get tested prior to the start of school. And the reason for that, and that's why the Department of Health recommends it, is because, number one, for all schools in Nassau County to go back at the same time is beyond the capacity of the testing to begin with. And by the time you receive the results, if we even attempted it, none of them would be valid anymore based on the time frame, since students would be surely able to be mixing outside of school, either prior or after school, prior to the start of school or after. But we will help families determine how to get testing if they believe they require it, and if we recommend it through our health staff. And leads us to the end of our health and safety section in dealing with medically fragile students. So as I indicated in an earlier email last week, we are making available to those families who have students who have underlying health conditions or family members whose health may be compromised to choose full distance learning experience. And these students will, at this time, in essence, be following as a hybrid student along with the class. And this question has come up numerous times. So once again, anyone who's at home, for any of the reasons that we may come to, will be following along their regular schedule with their teacher via Google Classroom and Google Meet. And so we do ask that if you are still considering opting for the full virtual option, that you do so by end of business tomorrow, so that we can honor that. And why do we need your commitment? I know so many people ask that question, and it's a great question. And the reason is very difficult to imagine for a single parent. It's very hard to imagine for us as school administrators how to design our plans without knowing numbers. So the planning is so key to our success. And in our safety and academic areas, how many students we have in each area is key to the plans in place, which may include where classes are being held. In elementary school, there are no classes going to the library under this plan, so the library is being utilized as an actual classroom for a larger group. If your children in that grade are attending that location, but then all of a sudden a large group of that grade no longer are coming to in person, maybe we can have a better utilization of our space. We also have to know what type of materials to plan for, and who may need to get those materials at home, and how we're going to get them to you, which we'll be sure to take care of, but we need to have those plans solidified so that we can most effectively handle that. And that also means that because these safety plans are so fine-tuned, we can't have students coming back and forth from virtual to in-person regularly. We will make available the opportunity for you to come back at the beginning of each marking period. All you would have to do is be in contact with your building principal in advance of the end of the marking period. And we would need some time to make adjustments inside the building to bring students back in person. Similarly, we really have to ask that if you want to try it out for a week or two, and then if you're not comfortable, go home, that isn't something that's really manageable. Not on the scale that we're talking about here. Because once again, materials have to be prepared, space has to be set up. So similarly on the reverse end, we're asking everyone to make the commitment to at least the first marking period. I know the language of my email was strong about you're making a year-long commitment and that you can request to come back. All those requests will be honored. But we do need you to understand that we need that choice from you as parents to commit to at least a block of time that we can work with it, and that if there's some serious issues, you work through your buildings to address them. But we know we cannot function properly and safely if we have parents choose to go in and out, or choose when to go in and out. So once again, if you haven't already done so, and you wish to do so, Please fill out our survey that I sent home and I resent this morning as a reminder by tomorrow afternoon. And that goes with our transportation as well, please. So the social and emotional health and wellness is something that is so key to the growth and development of all of our children. There have been significant unintended negative consequences from being away from our buildings for our students, for our parents, and for our staff. And that is why it's so key from, again, the CDC, the AAP, and what we see here in our own backyard, that if we can come back in a safe way, that we should. Once again, 3 long, hard months in the spring on distance learning. We have to go more than triple that amount of time together, where students have never even yet met their teachers. Last March, with 70% of the year completed, your teachers have wonderful relationships with your children. They understand the expectations and the rigors of their classes. They have more of the foundational skills required to complete those classes. But being in a position to put, especially young or at-risk students, immediately behind a screen is a very difficult task for any educator to help students reach their potential. So we are preparing this plan to maximize the amount of time our students can be in front of our teachers and in front of other staff members in the safest, healthiest way possible, again with all 3 safety measures in place. And our staff are preparing to focus on the social and emotional well-being of all on our return, inclusive of our PPS staff who have been and will continue to work with all of them and all of you as we try to focus on creating a comfortable environment upon our return. Because once again, the best teaching and learning is not X's and O's of teaching and learning. It's through the relationships and connections we build between student and staff. So as we move into the instructional area of this presentation, I do want to point out that the decisions that are made, and are, again, have no problem honoring those that request the all virtual. We understand that parents all have very different feelings about this. But because of those changes, we will need to make adjustments. And that means that all teachers at this point that you believe you may have are potentially subject to change. So please know that in advance, that once we close our request survey tomorrow, the principals will be spending every waking hour to determine now how that adjustment will impact their planning. Regardless of which teacher, though, your child has of record, all IEP and 504 mandates will be fully scheduled through either pull-out or push-in as needed at all levels. In the secondary school, this also means that at this time, the administration at the high school cannot honor requests for changes. We must work with what we have. The only exception being if you find that your schedule has something with an error, meaning you're missing a class, or you're supposed to be taking Spanish and you have Italian listed. Please know that your requests for electives and changing your mind at this time is something we simply cannot undo with all of the work that's gone into these plannings at this time. There were many questions on the electives, the different specials that will take place. Music is going to be an area that is taking a big hit throughout the state of New York and all of our plans. We're trying very hard to maintain as much as possible. In the elementary school, of course, the elementary general music will continue to push in, and our lessons will still occur in small groups with proper spacing, which is 12 feet for band instruments instead of 6 feet. But at this point, no morning rehearsals will take place. In secondary, we're proud that we are utilizing other spaces in 7 to 12, like the gymnasium, where our groups, larger groups, can meet. And again, our instrumental lessons will have larger spaces for small groups to continue to progress in all of our instrumental endeavors. But in 6th grade, we have made a small shift in our program where typically all 6th graders would get generally 3 out of 4 electives because there's the first bit of choice. In order to help us maintain those cohorts, now instead of getting 3 out of 4, you're going to get all 4 out of 4. Mr. Fullerton and Ms. Hayes have built a very nice program and an elective wheel that all students will get exposure to, and that includes everyone getting music appreciation, as there will be no larger band, orchestra, or chorus performing whatsoever at this time. But again, all instrumental lessons will take place, which allows our students to continue with their progress on their instruments of choice. Physical education will always be outdoors, unless simply can't make it due to bad weather, in which case they'll use any variety of classrooms as designed by their building principals. No locker rooms will ever be needed, and so none will be used, and no one will need to change their clothes, so we'll make sure that students come prepared. What will physical education look like is still to be determined. Once again, building and designing activities that are safe and enjoyable, that have limited or no equipment, is a challenge, but we do have an entire state working on this together. And by the time school starts, we hope to have some pretty good information on what they're going to do, and that will be back again in relation to the recess activities. Art will be push-in K to 6, your typical course in 7 to 12, although the space in which you are working will be, of course, by yourself, and there will be no sharing of any supplies. What about a couple of the other items within our programs? High school athletic program, as I've made you aware, is still to be determined, with a new start date pushed to September 21st. Mr. Franchi, our athletic director, is the president of the Nassau County Athletic Directors Association. He and I speak daily. Neither of us have heard anything in regards to any updates on what may happen with high school athletics. All field trips are currently postponed, and all extracurricular activities, which generally start up after a few weeks after school starts, will be evaluated on a case-by-case basis once school does start. And because we're currently not going to allow any after-school activities, AIS is currently on hold until we again determine who's in school, who's on virtual learning, and how things are going once we return. There are a number of questions that have come up regarding addressing the gaps from the March closing until the rest of the year and now. Mr. Spence has worked with the principals, especially at the elementary level, who have conducted numerous grade level meetings, to have teachers have intense collaboration between one grade level and the next to understand not only where they left off prior to working from home, but how much they were able to accomplish while at home during those 3 months. And while we've provided some additional summer support with our math packets, our summer reading, we do understand that those are only being completed by those who are most motivated. And for all students, we are fortunate to have a number of tools available in the district, such as NWEA and Achieve 3000, that allow us to actually get a true read on where students are, especially in K to 8, where we have ongoing data on each of your children. And so we can really understand where they started last year, where they are for this year, places in the middle where assessments have been conducted, and again, use our programs at Writers Workshop, Fountas and Pinnell, and ST Math to help with that process. Extra help is really unknown at this point. Trying to, again, be upfront. We know that this is something we're still working on because we are still planning out those arrival and dismissal procedures and trying to make sure students do get home safely and quickly and allow us to then work on the cleaning of the buildings each night. So more information on extra help will be forthcoming and may not occur until after we start school and see what type of movement there is throughout the buildings. Mr. Spence has done a tremendous amount of work, along with a lot of dedicated staff, to offer these courses and more in professional development and preparation for our reopening of school. What type of things are going to be more applicable in the settings that we're describing, online and in front of a class that cannot practice certain things that it had done in the past. And so as you see the long list, it concludes with an extensive amount of curriculum writing work throughout K-12 to also address some of these needs. And as a reminder, our distance learning plan that we have also provided on the district website in a separate document for you to follow more easily is built on these premises. It will resemble a regular school day. 6 to 12 will be 9 periods. Everyone will be on each period. Attendance will be taken. All your normal grading policies and evaluations will be in place. It's a requirement that all students have daily live interactions between themselves and the teacher. And so our distance learning plan meets that requirement. And we do know that distance learning may be needed in a variety of ways. One is if the regional infection rate goes beyond 9% over a 7-day average, all school buildings would end up being closed in that region. But we also know that if a particular contact tracing outcome reaches for a class or a grade or even a school, that's a possibility, and they would shift quickly to distance learning, which is why our plans are designed to transition seamlessly between one and the other. Still lots more to do. As you see, I've already now on our second parent forum, I've already met with the teachers once. You'll notice the distance learning plan has already been posted separately on our website. The contact tracing and testing plan will be updated likely today or tomorrow. But in addition, again, later this afternoon, all 5 building plans with more specifics to your school will be posted this afternoon as well. So please give that a read for additional questions. And then this presentation is also posted for your review. So let me restate that we need your help tremendously, that all our plans require every ounce of Bethpage pulling together. And we're fortunate that no place is able to do so like Bethpage. We do know that what happens off-site will have as much impact on our success as what happens on school grounds. That inside these buildings, we will be following a higher degree of safety and health practices and procedures than any indoor facility in New York. And we're very proud that we're able to put that in place. And we also want to remind you that things can change rapidly and outside of our control. Where someone else tells me, sorry, you've got to close that school. You've got to close the district. You've got to close that class down. And we have to be ready to make some of those transitions. And we know and recognize that those are huge burdens on the community, especially in the area of K-6 for childcare. And of course, even through all middle school with the ability of children to work independently without parent involvement. It's a huge undertaking. So while we can, we want to try to ensure that the students are in front of our teachers, where education is done best, for as long as possible until the time in which somebody says we can't, or we determine that it is not working well. But our plans are all built that way so that we can make adjustments as needed, and we'll have updates be added as needed. So once again, each of our buildings will have more detailed plans highlighted on our district website later today. Just remember, if we're all on the same page, we'll be able to do this. We know how important it is for our kids to be part of this school community, and for you to be a part of it as well makes it what the special place that it is. So our hashtag means something very important to us. And so at this point, I'll turn the slide deck off. Mr. Harrington and Mr. Spence have been securing some of your questions in a document so we can scroll through, and I'll spend some time referring to your questions now. So please bear with me as I try to make sure I get as much in the time we have here possible. If my child has to miss school due to a temperature, the return procedure is, again, I'll say more details will come from each building, because but it will surely come with an understanding that I believe I said is 24 hours without symptoms. And if you are able to log in remotely at home because you're sent home or ill, that of course will count as attendance. Again, one of the beauties of the current plan are that you are able to attend at home. That's why the virtual option is available. And if then we are in essence forcing children to stay home due to illness or isolation, they can log in. In the high school level, will rooms and desks be cleaning between classes? The answer is no, not at this time. Number one, wipes are not available in the quantities that would be required for schools to do so, even if we wish to do it. Secondly, again, the advice from the medical experts is that hand washing is far more valuable than wiping down surfaces. And so we have that available, and we'll be focusing heavily its attention at each entrance and exit of each classroom. Being said last night, before and after care, go. How does this affect contact tracing? We do have plans for before and after care to occur in our 3 elementary schools. I'll be meeting with Discovery again. I've already met a few times, and once we determine who's in need of it, and then once we determine who will be attending in person, that allows us to understand what spaces are available, we will then finalize those plans. We do understand that by adding this layer of need for childcare does potentially add a complication for contact tracing. But that is why the contact tracing protocols will be followed, and that is why it's also important to understand that close contact is the standard to follow. And so there is the potential that even if somebody is with somebody who's sick, they may never have been in close contact. And that's a great thing. What is the plan if the dividers are not in for the first day of school? Is for Mr. Harrington and I to pack our stuff and go home, because that would be a bad thing. The plan is that they'll be here. Question is, if students are sitting behind a desk 6 feet apart with the barriers, is it still mandatory to wear a mask? And the answer is yes. We are making sure that it is all 3 pieces in place, and when they are not going to wear the mask is going to be through the instruction of the teacher, as mentioned earlier. And again, the reason being is that we then control the environment, and we have everybody working on the same set of protocols and procedures, as opposed to allowing students to somehow choose for themselves, which would be very difficult to manage. And that's what the mask breaks are designed to do. And we do have a very thorough quantity of mask breaks designed in these current plans. Question with respect to pivoting to virtual learning is needed. What point will the school decide how many reported cases is too much? That will clearly come from consultation with the Department of Health, because again, how those cases trace out throughout the building will determine if a building has to close for an extended period of time. So I don't have any metrics to work with currently. What kind of communication will happen as circumstances change? Well, if anyone was on with me last night, with us here last night, you know that circumstances change, which is my first parent forum ended up with a corrupted link, so we were late. And as we were trying to reinstitute that, I was able to hop on and text all of you twice to let you know we had a delay, and then secondly, where to find the new link. So communication now with the tools we have available can happen rapidly and thoroughly. But the specific communication, if a student falls ill, will again be made based on the Department of Health's guidelines and guidance that they'll have direct contact with us. And that is how we will implement any notifications. Because there are, of course, some HIPAA concerns along with all of this. Since my daughter forgets supplies and lunch occasionally, will I still be able to drop it off? The answer is we are going to have, what we do have, yes, you will be able to drop things off. We do have our vestibules that are now complete, which means that anyone who is, and I believe there's another question about this elsewhere I saw, any visitor who's trying to come into the building, first of all, visitors will be reduced dramatically. The drop-off area will be inside the vestibule, which is contained. Any visitor that wishes to come into the building for an appointment will have to have their mask on, but then temporarily bring it down to match their ID. That'll be passed through our bank teller window and checked through our system, and also have a temperature scan prior to the entering of the building. To do this for one visitor at a time is feasible. To do it for all of our students and staff at one arrival time is not. There are questions about events during the course of the year, like homecoming and spirit night. This is too soon to answer. The reason being is that we need to make sure everybody's back in school now first, before we determine what can happen next. And we are hoping that we can bring activities to the children and the community, but at this point everything is being postponed until further notice. Any of your dismissals, high school, middle school, the questions here about that. Again, I ask you to refer to your building plan that will be posted later today. Questions about if, again, the heat in classrooms and are allowed to make more mask breaks. The mask breaks are designed to stay below the threshold of what close contact means to start with. So if there is overbearing days of heat, some of the adjustments will be to be outdoors more, not necessarily to take more mask breaks. If lockers are not used, what are they going to be carrying around all day? The answer is that we are going to be looking to bring back more a minimalist type of set of supplies, and that is still being worked out. Will incoming 9th graders have orientation? We are planning to have all 3 levels, kindergarten, 6th grade, and 9th grade orientations put in place, but of course done in smaller groups. And the principals will be in touch with that at some point next week. More mask wearing questions. Take off masks once seated. No, children cannot take off masks unless directed by the teacher or staff member. So I want to make that clear. This is not where kids have choices. Staff don't have choices to do it either. They have to wear them until the staff member determines that everyone's in the right place at the right time for us to take that up to 15-minute break. Yes, we do know. Question again about switching of classes and sharing of desks and partitions. Again, we do know that that's a concern with parents in terms of the ability to clean in between. It's just not possible. So again, there's not going to be wipes cleaning in between. But again, based on the recommendations from the medical experts, there is a lot less concern there than there is about, again, hand hygiene being far more important. Hand sanitizer is going to be in the classrooms regularly and is available, again, for the entrance and exit at the minimum, and then, of course, if needed, more so. There's another question about entering the building for parents and wearing masks and not being suspicious. I think I just answered that. Will the policy be if a child has a temperature of 100 still be a policy? Yep. Right now it's 100.0 is the recommendations. If the recommendations change from the health experts, we would change as well. Question about the fact that doors and windows will be open. How will we keep our children safe from the increased crime that's going on? The answer is that we do have, again, security at all our buildings. Previous 2 years, we've added security so that there is an outdoor patrol as well as an interior patrol. And that way we'll have, again, doors are only going to be open interior, not exterior. So it's just the windows, and that would be on any typical day possible anyway. COVID cough can last for weeks is considered a legitimate symptom. The answer to that, and so they'd still be able to, they'd have to stay home until they're symptom free. I would say, again, that's the guidance that we have and we would follow, but that would surely be for someone who has an extended period of time of symptoms in consultation with your doctor and our doctor to determine. And of course, if they're home on isolation, they can switch to virtual, and it would be expected. As we said, temperature screenings entering the building for students, no, I mentioned that earlier. That's not a feasible, currently feasible plan. If that changes and we find a more reasonable way to add temperature scanning again before entering the building, we will. It's not for the issue is not the equipment. The issue is the process and trying to get all people through. And how do you handle when many are false positives, as we're noting in lots of summer programs around the state? And what do you do with those children? How do you pull them off the line, etc.? So again, the Department of Health, the CDC, highly recommend it happens at home. And that parents then take not only the responsibility, but it is that extra measure of training that goes into their own practices each and every day. Can you scroll up a little bit for me? Drills. With social distancing rules in place, will lockdown drills still be conducted? Oh, great question. All of our drills will be conducted. We're required to do 12 drills a year, 4 of which have to be lockdown. However, the state has provided for a way in which to accommodate those drills by having adjustments being made. The drill does not have to be live any further. For example, conducting a lockdown drill would include the doors being closed, the understanding and the announcements being made, and simply stating where we would go as a class, as opposed to all going into that corner and bunching up. Fire drills can be conducted where they're staggered, meaning if I have to do at least 8 and we choose not to do them all, do all the classes being removed at the same time, we'd have to simply add more drills to say certain classes in certain areas to avoid classes bumping into each other. I'm just scrolling through with the other administrators here, trying to get questions that haven't been already asked and answered. Anybody who doesn't want to choose questions about transportation and concern about which run you're on, the first, second, or third of the day. If you're not interested in using the buses for those reasons, it's understandable, and I would simply ask you to please complete that parent survey to indicate that you will not be using the bus and that it will change some of our plans. The masks that are authorized for use, these are going to be the medical, what do we call these, patient masks that are typical that you see, and a number of other face coverings that cover the nose and mouth. There's been some debate lately with a recent study out of Duke University on the neck gaiters, and yet the New York Times just wrote something today that maybe that was a little overstated. So under the current circumstances, it's still all applicable until you hear from us otherwise. But it must cover, of course, the nose and the mouth. We have a question about difficult to acquire masks due to shortages. We have already secured a large reserve supply of thousands of masks so that if children need one, they'll be provided one. And we're already working with our cooperative to be on a set schedule in case we need to secure more. Process for children to refuse to comply with the mask requirements. The answer is just like any other insubordination. If you are failing to follow directions, first the teacher and then if necessary the administration gets involved to help redirect children to the appropriate behavior. That's as would be in any case, but of course now applied to this situation. Part of these questions that I'm seeing, good questions regarding specific situations with having a cold or sinus issues. I do want to, again, speak to the fact that this time of the year, we may face a certain amount of symptomatic issues, and that would differ possibly in the winter. I do want to state that we just want to try to see if we can even get to the winter. We know that there's a high likelihood that we won't be able to maintain all in person at all times. And we do want to simply, again, get the students in front of our teachers to build those connections and relationships as thoroughly as possible prior to having to make any shifts to other versions of our plans, our other plans, a hybrid or a full hybrid or full distance learning plan. So some of those questions in regarding common colds and coughs, that information is going to evolve, I'm sure, once we return to school as well. Will we lose school attendance credits for 5 days when I could have the access to virtual for at least 4 of the 5? Now again, if you are present, you're present. That is the issue with our plans, are that if you are able to attend, you will get credit for attending. Portable plug-in AC units. So good question. Can you donate an AC? The answer is no. AC units, we simply don't even have the electrical capacity to do that. They need to be installed. They don't just drop into a window. There's a pretty significant process of changing out an entire window and having to replace it with a new one that's designed to go with that. So no, we cannot at this time expect to be adding air conditioners. More questions about the sharing of desks at the high school and JFK. We'll look to see what other options are available. But again, we do not have the capacity to clean the desks in between changing of classes. We do, again, everything is really dependent on the washing of hands thoroughly. Okay, you can keep going up. 46. Questions about the hallway. So Bethpage in-school plans preventing hallway overcrowding. Again, to start with at JFK, you've already reduced the building capacity in the hallways by 1/3 to start with. We're adding time to the passing time, and Mr. Fullerton will be releasing students in different phases, in different waves, and no one will be stopping to go to their locker. And this is a huge benefit, so that once you walk out, your job is to simply walk to your next place and not stop in between. Bathrooms will be closed during passing, so there won't be any issue there. And again, in contact tracing, close contact definitions, simply passing somebody who is infected is of very little risk. There'll be lots of adults in the hallways to help prevent close contact as well. Okay, there's upgrading classrooms for filters question that we addressed. Will students be required to have a negative COVID test to be allowed back to school after 14-day quarantine? Not for secondary contact. You're not even staying home, as I mentioned earlier. And no, there'll be issues in dealing with symptom-free as well. Again, getting tested will be a personal decision based on parents and their health care provider. Mr. Harrington, do you know what the filter is in the Univent?
MERV 7 or 8.
Okay.
There's different models.
They're different. From the MERV 7. Our new ventilation system is an upgrade to our current systems with new filtering. So there's a question there about which filter it uses. I'm not 100% certain, but MERV 7 or 8 is what Mr. Harrington here is mentioning.
Could be as high as MERV 13.
And might be as high as MERV 13. Another question about what happens in cold weather. I'm going to respectfully defer questions about winter months for now, because as some would say, first things first, let's get everybody back and in through September and see if that's something that can be sustained. Every prior year. Okay, there's a long question about masks, normalizing them with criminals and predators. We know that our schools are not riddled with that concern, but I do understand the concern outside of school. Okay, those are similar. Can we scroll down to some of the instructional questions you guys have? Okay. Question: if I'm trying to make the right decision for my son who attends a high school, if I send him to school and he or I are uncomfortable with the way it's going, can he switch at any time to remote learning? And the answer really, again, is we have to discourage that, because I don't have things prepared for people to switch at any time. It's impossible to do so. So again, I really want you to think carefully about your decision, and we will surely honor that decision. But we are going to stick with at least the first marking period to have child switch from one to the other. If related services are done as a push-in, do I account for that person being in the classroom? And by account, if you mean keep track of, so in case we have a contact tracing issue, the answer is yes. We will be working on everything to ensure that all movement in our buildings is tracked carefully. Will homework assignments be lighter or not given at all once they get home to play and relax? The answer is no. School is going to be just like school at this point. But we, of course, are taking into very much consideration the early parts of school and the social and emotional wellness piece. But I don't want to make any promises about quantities of work at this time. We have a responsibility to teach all children and to attempt to teach the full curriculum. Nothing else has been canceled. Regents exams are still in place, SATs are still in place, ACTs, AP exams. So it's our responsibility to prepare them for those. And so we don't want to start by saying we're going with less than our best, but we know we may need to make adjustments at times. Do we know which teachers are teaching remotely? The answer is at this point likely all of them. Because again, for now, under the current conditions, your children are going to be in class, either in front of the teacher or at home. Either way, same class. The teachers are working on strategies in which to control that, as the next question asks, by utilizing the technology. We have Chromebooks in the hands of all teachers now, or we're about to, as well as smartboards in every instructional space. Every teacher assistant will have a Chromebook, and these will allow the staff to work on a variety of ways to bring what's happening inside their classroom to you at home. And in some cases, no differently than they may have done in the springtime. But again, Mr. Choi, our Director of Technology, all the rest of our directors for all of our subject areas are working to help support teachers in doing that. And once again, the good news is the whole world is going through times where virtual learning is taking place. So there is lots that's going on in that area to help ensure that teachers have good chances to make it work well. If a hybrid is available, can I provide specific guidance on how it works? A hybrid is available only as a school-wide plan, and that would be if we decide that we have to bring down capacity or someone else decides we have to bring down capacity. In reality, the hybrid model that we have of about 50% in at a time is no different in the classroom than the current plan, because every classroom will maintain social distancing. The places that are somewhat different will be in the secondary schools, 7 to 12, the changing of classes. But now again, I've already reduced the changing of classes by a third in the middle school. And at the high school, as we described, there's lots of procedures and steps in place that are going to reduce the condensing of children in the hallway and moving them quickly to the next location to avoid close contact. Will teachers be better trained on Google Classroom? Will the school be using it better than last year? We know there's a variety of ways in which the staff handled the use of Google Classroom. As I noted earlier, Mr. Spence has a tremendous number of professional development opportunities that the staff has been preparing through all summer to be ready for that. If I want to send my child for in-person instruction next trimester, will students be surely allowed to be back in? The answer is yes. The only exceptions would be if you were simply at that time not well. You were dealing with a COVID symptom or positive case. What percentage of teachers or how many not coming back is yet to be determined, but not even certain I'm allowed to share that honestly as a personnel matter. But we know that our teachers are eager to be back. Clarify the need to remove part of the class. Okay, clarify the need to remove part of the class when there are over a certain number of children. And the answer is, once we determine how many people are going to choose the virtual option, we then reevaluate and see how many children are actually now in each class and how does that relate to the spaces we have in each of our rooms. We once again, we provided what we believe, what we know to be the maximum capacity for the maximum number of students who could attend. But once we get those responses back, and if it resembles the initial survey that was put out about sending your children back to school, if it resembles anything near that, we understand what changes could be made and adjustments would be made, and then far fewer, if any, areas or classes would require it. In the high school, for example, I think there were already 4 or 5 periods that don't require any students to move to other spaces. And then the others that might, again with 100% capacity, would be just very few. Someone wrote, the email mentions commitment from the parent. What does this entail? Is there a requirement to assist with the learning between 8 and 6? No, the commitment is simply that you stay on that version of learning for at least a minimum amount of time in order to allow us to best plan and prepare before the academic piece, of course, the safety piece within our buildings. Will parents be responsible for grading homework and tests? No, the teachers will be. Will we be provided with teaching materials, hard copies? The answer is yes. If we are going to find that teachers are going to prepare materials to have handouts, we would make sure that they can get to you. And that is, again, one of the biggest concerns with us having your commitment as part of our virtual group, so that we understand what we're dealing with, and again, work in conjunction with the teachers to get the materials you need provided to you. And so the other question about will we be provided with a weekly class schedule so you can understand the daily or weekly deliverables, the answer is, as I mentioned earlier, is you are following the class as if you were in the seat. And all classes are following a regular scheduled day, and elementaries will be following a regular block scheduling that the teachers and the principal will share with you at the elementary level. When and how will driver's ed resume? I'm Mr. Healy, who is responsible for that. I'm still not certain what any updates have been. I think only a week or two ago they actually even made anything available to know about driver's ed. It's been quite an interesting conundrum. They haven't had anything going on. Will teachers wear microphones to hear them through their masks? We're looking into those that need it. We're doing demonstrations to see if that's actually required. We know that there are FM units in our elementary rooms K-2 anyway, but we are working with our committee to determine what additional support might be needed for teachers to work with their children in their classrooms. In grade 6, they will remain in one classroom. Will they have the same teacher for all subjects, or will the teachers move to different classrooms? The teachers will move to different classrooms. Qualifications of those that are in the small group instruction will be certified teachers. Could be, again, a teacher assistant who's a certified teacher, a substitute teacher who's working in that block of time, other area teachers that are taking over those responsibilities. Again, and that's only if needed. I mentioned the homework question. That one came out before. Again, the question of an effort to cohort in the high school. We have spent months trying to figure out how to cohort in high school, and it's not possible without destroying the integrity of the academic program. Because of, for example, every level of course in the main subject areas, they have 5 levels of that course. AP, honors, regular, extended, self-contained. So to try to be able to mix that into one English class of one grade level and then make that flow throughout all of the courses is an impossible task without taking away significant opportunities for kids. And we've already knowingly, unfortunately, had to do that enough. For those students choosing virtual, are they guaranteed to have the same classes they would have had if they went in person? The answer is yes. Can they still participate in club and sports if they become available? Clubs surely would be one of the areas that has a chance to go virtual, even if we are in person, to again have people exit the building and get started with the process of getting things ready for the next day. Somebody who stays on all virtual at home, but then wants to come play sports and bang bodies on the athletic field is an interesting question. And the answer is I don't see why not, but I do understand how that seems difficult to imagine. Will extra help be virtual? I mentioned extra help earlier, not sure. Let's see, if a child going remote, able to attend driver's ed after school, the answer is yes, if they do that. Lifeguarding gym class, we're not certain yet. That's a good question if we're going to be able to offer that because of the need for the use of the pool. We're also not certain, and the reason being is that what are the requirements of the class, and can there be significant adjustments to a lifeguarding class in order to make sure that they can meet the certification requirements, but also possibly do it in a different way. We were able to allow the students to complete their lifeguard training from the spring that was interrupted by the use of the outdoor pool here at the town of Oyster Bay last week, as a matter of fact, and so they were able to get certified. So, how are we handling band at the high school level? I mentioned a few earlier that lessons will take place, and looks like the band will be able to be conducted, but inside the gym. Very, very spread out. Who will be enforcing mask wearing and social distancing in the hallways? Again, the masks are going to be enforced by all adults, but more importantly, I do think that's what I mentioned about we need all of your help. And the kids in Bethpage, by and large, do a tremendous job of supporting one another, and we do expect and hope that they will take care of things themselves, knowing how important it is, especially if you want to be in school. We can only maintain the in-person school if we are able to keep all of our health and safety measures not only in place, but then keep any outbreaks from occurring. So we do believe there's a lot of motivation there in our students to help also ensure that they follow those guidelines. How does it work for the virtual students K to 6 while their class is having lunch, recess, or when the class gets pulled out for PE and art? Well, art is not pull out, art will be push in, so they will follow along on live stream. Physical education, I will say to be determined, but they would be part of that class. And then, of course, lunch and recess, you would be handling that at home for virtual students. How will tests be conducted for a virtual student, especially those that have accommodations, is the next question. And I would simply say that I don't have an answer for you today, but again, the good news is we have millions of students and hundreds of thousands of teachers across the country who are in the same boat. So we'll be working alongside them as well as our own to figure out what tools are best used to conduct testing. And I assume that's another question about how will testing be done. I hope that's referring to academic testing and not COVID testing, and I think I just answered that. Can I be more specific about marking periods for opting in or out? We'll give you those specific date ranges. We will surely not go without many prompts if we're fortunate to stay open to the first marking period in all our buildings, to simply ask if anybody is thinking about coming back to in-person. Please start letting us know at this time with these types of deadlines. I don't have the specifics today, but again, it will not be without lots of prompting of the families. Okay, grade 6 question. I answered that earlier. Keep going up, Andrew, please. I think those are very similar. Yeah, keep going, because that's lifeguarding again. Band again. Change circumstances, I hit that earlier. Please let us know how the lab works for the high school students who opted for virtual. If you're referring to a science lab in that question, then first and foremost, there are already provisions from the state ed department that allow for flexibility in how the typical hands-on labs are conducted. And so again, the teachers are working on how to, and as a matter of fact, are meant to be done virtually. So the teachers are working on that now on how to best provide those experiences. If one child in Charles campaign tests positive, her siblings in JFK and BHS do not need to be quarantined, is the question? No, the answer is if a child is positive, then those people at home are now in the first contact. So they would stay on quarantine. If the child at Charles campaign is not positive, but is first contact and has to stay home because of their class, her siblings do not have to stay home, being a secondary contact. Question on how long would a first grader need to be logged in to virtual classes and this is to help parents in need of babysitting. It would fulfill a normal school day. There would be opportunities where they wouldn't have to be on the computer based on how the teacher goes through the course of the day with the recesses, lunches, etc. But it would follow basically a typical day at this point. Any changes to the typical day would be within minutes of a start and end time, only to help us coordinate between staffing, transportation, and again, arrival and dismissal procedures that each building is building out. If there are no lockers, how will books be managed without completely overloading the backpacks? So we mentioned that earlier, and I think what's going to come might be things like you bring stuff to handle the day, not your whole binder for each class. You might bring a folder that allows you to work with the materials given to you that day, and you simply bring that folder home and empty it each day. We would imagine that things would be no more than your Chromebook and potentially a string bag size amount of material is what people are starting to try to work with. But more information will be following on that. Will the children in the classroom be visible on the virtual live stream of that class? The answer is possibly. There are a couple of ways in which teachers may choose to send their Google Meet at home. The one way that's more likely to occur, just an estimate loosely at this time of the summer, is that the teacher will be sharing their smartboard presentation with the kids at home, not using the camera on the Chromebook to share what's going on in front of them, because that's a much more crisp experience for the students to follow along on the technology we have available. Now, at other times, the teacher may use the camera to show a small part, or more likely themselves on the screen, but not to pan across an entire room. I'm still confused about the hybrid option. The hybrid option is not available at this time. We are all in person 5 days a week is the district's decision, because in the end it is very similar to the hybrid, but we get to have the kids in front of us every day instead of only half the time. And yet the same conditions in classrooms are being met as is during the hybrid condition. Okay, will students participate in BOCES programs for half the day still be going forward with that? The answer is yes. BOCES just announced that they are going with full in-person also. And so we are working out with BOCES the necessary transportation to go with that. Going into flu season, who will decipher flu from coronavirus? And the answer is, I'm just hoping we make it to flu season here. And I don't have an answer for the specific question yet, but it will surely be a medical expert. Concerned that teachers will not be able to effectively teach in class and remotely at the same time. Have the teachers been given a plan or training to manage this? The answer is yes. There's been, as described earlier in my presentation, a ton of opportunity for teachers to get training on this, and they're continuing to do so between now and the start of school. There will a question on buses for students with IEPs, and those buses will still be in place, and all of the bus safety rules will still apply. And just reading through questions trying to find questions that may be new. Will students taking the bus be showing bus passes? That's a great question that I'll add to our list of things to look into and hand that off to Mr. Jantz at the high school, since this is especially for BHS, on how to control the busing and overcrowding for sure. That's a great question. We'll appreciate it. We'll add that. More questions about arrival and dismissal with all of the parents showing up to pick up their kids. How are we going to handle that? Most important part of that is going to be your cooperation in understanding when principals send out their guidelines for staggered approaches. So please try to refer to those plans, and also know that the plan can change when we get a better way to do it or more information that helps us. Scroll a physical question about sports have not been canceled, although the question asks since sports have been canceled. They have not been canceled. Sports have been pushed back to September 21st start date at this time. Again, I don't know what to expect, but we are sure anticipating either outcome. It is hard to imagine having a full set of contact sports under these conditions. I understand sports and clubs not a priority. Is it priority? Is there a chance for virtual clubs? I addressed that earlier. Yes, we will assess, at the early stages of the school year, and not to mention work with the different clubs to determine which clubs are actually more beneficial to run in a virtual setup. Not all clubs are able to do so. Excuse me. Security guard at every door. Again, outdoor doors will be closed at all times, so a security guard at every door is not necessary. The outside of the building will still remain in its lockout mode at all times. Again, the doors we're referring to are the indoor doors. Okay, you can go up to lunch if you can scroll up, please. Okay. We mentioned lunch is eating in the classrooms. The lunchrooms will be monitored by adults in all different capacities in each building. Depends on the staffing, so who monitors it is going to vary by location. If a gym and cafeteria used for lunches, the plan for maintaining social distancing is that each child will have their own desk to eat at, similar as they would in their own classroom. So they'll still maintain social distancing through their seat. If children do not have lunch in their schedule, what are we going to do? And can they have a snack? That's a wonderful question. Thank you for adding that question. And I don't know if that exists for our schedule or not. We'll add that to Mr. Jance's to-do list and getting that one. Currently, as of today, can seniors go out for lunch? And the answer is yes. And part of that is a capacity issue. And we know this is a very controversial item with the history of seniors having the ability to go off campus and with Bethpage High School not having the capacity to keep all 4 grades in the building for lunch. And so we know that it adds an additional layer of risk. But again, as of today, seniors are able to go out for lunch. But we do expect that they follow all the safety protocols each and every time. Orientation questions, yes, we are going to, as I mentioned, we're going to have orientations coming up. Okay, miscellaneous, are the forums recorded? This forum is recorded, as was last night's, so you can watch them at a later date. I wanted to know if, in order to have my son or daughter participate in National Junior Honor Society, would they have to come to school in person or stay home? The answer is they simply have to do well. Either place is fine with me, as hopefully it ends up being fine with you. No problem, no difference. Seniors out to lunch, seniors cars assigned spots. That I will have to defer to Mr. Healy in determining the typical assignment, right? We have spots, Mr. Spence? Yeah, yes. So a certain number of students, was a lottery?
Yes.
Yeah, the lottery for spots will be in place, and so Mr. Healy will conduct that as typical. Each school specific plan will be posted today, as I mentioned earlier. And are we still hosting the SAT in October? Oh wow, that's a great question too. Not sure yet. We'll get back to you on the SATs. I don't know. It's on the schedule. We're working on it. Mr. Spence is working on it. The expectation is to try to find a way to do it, since these haven't been available to a lot of our students recently. So at this point, about 2 hours in, I do want to thank you for joining us here this afternoon. Tried to answer as many questions as possible, and I thank my partners here, Mr. Spence, Mr. Harrington, Mr. Choi, for putting the questions that you sent through the email together for me to easily scroll through here. I'm sure that I got to many questions, but I'm also sure I didn't get to all your questions. But I do know that so much of what concerns parents and the many hundreds and hundreds of questions we received that we did look through are answered within the presentation that we used earlier today. So give it a good look if you can. But more importantly, if you do have other questions, always reach out when they're specific to your school, to your school principal, as they may be able to answer it directly. And secondly, we're always here to answer your questions as well. So don't hesitate to reach out to me or any of the assistant superintendents or Mr. Choi when you have questions about Chromebooks or other technology issues, as we're happy to do what we can to help. I want to thank you for joining us. Thank you for all that you do to support our schools. We are anxiously awaiting the time when we can be with your kids again, because as I said earlier, they're our kids too. And I just want to remind everybody to stay very strong. Bethpage strong. Take good care. We hope to see you soon. Thank you very much.